At a school where rigid traditions and unseen prejudices shape daily life, Alicia, a determined new student, realizes that her biggest challenge won't be the tough classes, but the suspicious glances and sharp words she faces. As her intelligence begins to challenge the status quo, she becomes the target of an authoritarian teacher whose hidden motivations run deeper than they seem. Amid growing tensions, an unexpected revelation threatens to turn everything upside down and change everyone's fate. What secrets does St. Clement's School hold, and what truths are waiting to be uncovered? Before we dive into today's story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Stick with us until the end, this story might surprise you more than you think. A fresh start. Alicia gripped the straps of her backpack tightly as she stared at the facade of St. Clement's School. The building was large, with light-colored walls and tall windows, but it had an old-fashioned charm that matched the small town she now called home. Everything here was new to her, the people, the places, even the scent in the air. Taking a deep breath, she walked through the gate, trying to ignore the feeling that many eyes were on her. A group of girls whispered quietly in a corner of the hallway. Alicia pretended not to notice and continued forward, searching for room 7B. When she entered, the students were already seated, some chatting, others flipping through their notebooks. She chose a seat by the window, setting her books on the desk as she observed the bustling classroom. The desks were wooden and slightly worn, with posters about math and geography tacked onto the walls. Soon, the teacher walked in. She was a tall woman with her hair tied back and glasses that made her look even more serious. She scanned the class, her gaze lingering on Alicia for a moment. "Good morning, class," she said, her voice firm but devoid of warmth. "We have a new student today." All eyes turned to Alicia. She felt her cheeks flush but managed a small smile and a timid wave. "My name is Alicia Ferreira," she said, trying to sound confident. "Very well, Alicia. I hope you can keep up. Here, we value discipline and dedication." The teacher adjusted her glasses and turned to the board. Alicia tried to focus on the literature lesson but quickly noticed that the teacher, Ms. Marissa, avoided looking at her or calling her name. When asking questions, she always chose other students. "Am I imagining things?" Alicia wondered. But deep down, she felt something was off. At lunch, Alicia grabbed her snack and sat on a bench near the courtyard. She watched groups of students chatting, but no one approached her. As she bit into her apple, a blonde girl with bright eyes and a hesitant smile appeared. "Hi, you're Alicia, right?" the girl asked. "Yes," Alicia replied, surprised. "I'm Clara. Can I sit here?" Alicia nodded, trying to hide her relief at finally having someone to talk to. "How was your first class?" Clara asked, making conversation. "It was different," Alicia hesitated, unsure how to describe how she felt. "Ms. Marissa seems really strict." Clara gave a half smile and glanced around before answering. "Yeah, she can be a bit complicated. But don't worry. You'll get used to it." Clara's tone was friendly, but Alicia sensed there was more to it. Clara seemed to know something but wasn't ready to share. When the bell rang, Alicia returned to the classroom, feeling like her first day was going to be more challenging than she'd anticipated. As she walked through the door, she noticed Ms. Marissa watching her from a distance, her serious gaze hinting at something deeper. Why was Ms. Marissa treating Alicia so coldly? And why did Clara seem hesitant to say more about the teacher? On her second day of school, Alicia arrived early, as she always did. She liked having a little time to get used to her surroundings before the classroom buzzed with chatter. But as she stepped inside, she noticed that Ms. Marissa was already there, organizing papers on her desk. "Good morning, Ms. Marissa," Alicia said politely. Marissa glanced up briefly but didn't reply. She simply returned to shuffling through her papers, as if Alicia weren't there. The silence was sharp and unsettling. Other students began to trickle in, filling the room with laughter and conversations. Clara was the last to enter. She spotted Alicia and gave her a small smile before sitting down beside her. The lesson started with an analysis of a short story by Machado de Assis. Ms. Marissa asked the students to read the text aloud, dividing the paragraphs among them. When it was Alicia's turn, her voice rang clear and confident through the room. But before she could finish, Marissa interrupted. "Alicia, you're reading too fast," she said. Her tone wasn't instructive, it was critical. "Try to be more careful." "Yes, ma'am," Alicia replied, suppressing the urge to ask why she was the only one receiving such feedback. The class continued with questions about the text. Alicia raised her hand twice to answer, but Marissa ignored her. When the teacher finally called on her, the question seemed less like an opportunity and more like a trap. "So, Alicia," Marissa began, folding her arms, "do you think the main character was wrong in his choices?" Alicia took a deep breath. "I don't think he was wrong, Ms. Marissa. He was trapped in a system that constrained him. I believe he did what he could within his circumstances." Marissa raised an eyebrow, scrutinizing her response. "Interesting. Though simplistic. Perhaps you should read more before forming such definitive opinions." A few students snickered softly. Alicia felt her cheeks burn but stayed quiet. When the bell rang for lunch, Clara turned to her with a concerned expression as they packed up their things. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I'm fine," Alicia replied with a forced smile. "But I don't think the teacher likes me very much." Clara hesitated, as if searching for the right words. "It's just that Ms. Marissa has a complicated way of dealing with some people." Alicia frowned. "Some people?" Clara went silent for a moment, then muttered, "It's not personal. She's just like that with anyone who's different." The word lingered in the air. Alicia knew exactly what Clara meant, but she pretended not to understand. Later, as she walked home, Alicia couldn't shake the conversation from her mind. Being judged unfairly was a feeling she knew all too well, but it didn't make it hurt any less. When she arrived home, she found her mom in the kitchen, preparing dinner. The aroma of garlic and onions sizzling in olive oil filled their small apartment. "How was school, honey?" her mom asked, stirring the pot. "It was fine," Alicia replied without much enthusiasm. Her mom stopped and looked at her, the way only a mom could. "Just fine? It's just, the teacher doesn't seem to like me much." Alicia's mom dried her hands on her apron and came closer. "Listen, sweetheart, you're not there to please anyone. You're there to learn and to show the world who you are. Always be yourself, and the rest. God will take care of it." The words were simple but struck a chord in Alicia's heart. She resolved to walk into school the next day with her head held high, no matter what happened. Alicia was determined to stand her ground. But what would Ms. Marissa do when she realized Alicia wasn't going to back down so easily? The next morning, Alicia walked into the classroom with steady steps, determined not to let herself be intimidated. She took her usual seat near Clara, who greeted her with a brief smile. "Feeling better today?" Clara asked as she organized her notebooks. I am, Alicia replied, keeping her insecurities to herself. I'm not going to let these things get to me. The lesson began as usual, with Ms. Marissa directing the class's attention to a poem by Carlos Drummond de Andrade. She read the verses with calculated intonation and then instructed the students to write their interpretations. Alicia focused on the task, pouring her thoughts onto the paper. She wrote about how the poem spoke of struggle, resilience, and the search for meaning in a world full of barriers. When she finished, she felt proud of her work. When Ms. Marissa asked for volunteers to share their interpretations, Alicia raised her hand without hesitation. Clara glanced at her with a mix of admiration and concern. Alicia, Ms. Marissa called, her tone neutral. Alicia read her interpretation confidently, explaining her ideas and concluding with a sentence that seemed to carry the weight of her own experiences. Sometimes, the barriers aren't in the world, but in people's hearts. For a moment, the room fell silent. Some students looked at her, impressed. Clara smiled faintly, but Ms. Marissa's expression remained stiff. An interesting perspective, Ms. Marissa finally said, but a bit dramatic. Let's aim for more objectivity next time. Although the comment was sharp, Alicia noticed that, this time, her classmates didn't laugh. It was as if her words had struck a chord. During lunch, Clara pulled Alicia aside to the courtyard. You were amazing in there, Clara said enthusiastically. Thanks, Alicia replied, still feeling the weight of Ms. Marissa's gaze. Clara hesitated before speaking again. You know, I think you're doing something no one else has managed before. What's that? Alicia asked, curious. You're making people notice how she acts, Clara said, glancing around as if to make sure no one was listening. You're not alone in this, Alicia. Alicia didn't reply right away. She was starting to realize there was something bigger going on at this school. Perhaps her presence wasn't just a personal struggle but an opportunity to challenge something deeper. Later, during science class, Ms. Marissa walked in to deliver some announcements. As she moved through the rows of desks, her eyes briefly met Alicia's in an intense, fleeting moment. It was then that Alicia noticed something different in the teacher's gaze. It wasn't just coldness, it was something more, a mix of distrust and perhaps even fear. What was lurking in Ms. Marissa's past that made her act this way? And how could Alicia turn her own fight into something that would impact the entire school? That night, as Alicia worked on her homework, she couldn't shake Ms. Marissa's gaze from her mind. It wasn't just the coldness in the teacher's demeanor, it was something deeper, an unspoken weight that seemed to permeate her actions. Alicia began to wonder if there was something in the teacher's past that could explain her disdain. The next day, during lunch, Alicia found Clara sitting in the courtyard with a book in her hands. Clara, can I ask you something? Alicia began, taking a seat beside her. Of course, Clara replied, closing her book. Have you noticed how Ms. Marissa seems different with me? Clara bit her lip, hesitating. I have. But, look, she's not exactly warm with anyone. Still, with you, it's more intense. Why? Alicia asked directly. Clara glanced around to make sure no one was nearby, then lowered her voice. I've heard rumors. I don't know if they're true, but people say Ms. Marissa had an issue in the past with someone in her family. Something about prejudice. Alicia frowned, surprised and intrigued. Do you think it has anything to do with me? Clara shrugged. I'm not sure. But she does seem to struggle with certain people, like I told you before. Before Alicia could ask more, the bell rang, signaling the end of lunch. The rest of the day, Clara's words echoed in her mind. An issue in her family's past. What could have happened? Back in literature class, Ms. Marissa made a point of ignoring Alicia again. But this time, the rest of the class seemed to notice. Clara exchanged glances with other students, and Alicia realized that the teacher's indifference was no longer just uncomfortable, it was becoming obvious to everyone. At the end of class, Alicia took a bold step. "Ms. Marissa, can I speak with you for a moment?" The teacher paused, stopping her task of gathering papers, and looked at Alicia coldly. "Go ahead. I just wanted to understand why you treat me differently. Did I do something wrong?" The question was blunt, and for a moment, Alicia thought the teacher wouldn't answer. But then Ms. Marissa adjusted her glasses and spoke in a low, cutting tone. "It's not about you, Alicia. Don't flatter yourself." She turned and walked out, leaving Alicia alone with more questions than answers. What did Ms. Marissa mean by, "It's not about you"? Could her past be more connected to Alicia than she realized? Revelations ahead. Ms. Marissa's words echoed in Alicia's mind for the rest of the day. "It's not about you. Don't flatter yourself." Alicia felt certain they held a deeper meaning, but she couldn't yet grasp what it was. That evening, over dinner, Alicia decided to open up to her mother. Sitting at their small kitchen table, surrounded by the aroma of vegetable stew, she recounted the teacher's behavior and what Clara had mentioned about a possible issue in Ms. Marissa's past. "Mom, do you think this could have something to do with me?" she asked, pushing her food around with her fork. Her mother looked at her intently, the way she always did when Alicia was troubled. "Sometimes, people carry things inside them they don't even understand," her mother said. "Maybe this teacher went through something that made her closed off or act this way. But that doesn't mean you have to accept how she treats you." "But what can I do? She won't even give me a chance to talk." "Keep being yourself. Be respectful but firm. And remember, the truth always comes out, sooner or later." Her mother's words brought Alicia some comfort but also fueled her curiosity about Ms. Marissa's past. The next morning, Alicia arrived at school with a new determination. During lunch, she approached Clara with an idea that had come to her the night before. "Clara, do you know if there's a teacher or someone older here at school who's known Ms. Marissa for a long time?" Clara furrowed her brow, intrigued. "I think so. Ms. Odette, the librarian. She's been here forever and knows everything. Do you think she'd talk to me? It's worth a try. She's really nice, and if you say you're interested in learning more about the school, she probably won't think it's weird." After classes, Alicia headed to the library. The space was quiet, filled with tall, neatly arranged shelves. Ms. Odette, a kind-looking woman with white hair and oversized glasses, was sitting behind the desk, flipping through a magazine. "Excuse me, Ms. Odette," Alicia said, walking up to her. "Hello, dear. How can I help you?" "I'd like to learn more about the school. I'm new here, and I heard you know a lot about its history." Ms. Odette smiled, clearly pleased. "Oh, that's true. I've been here for over 30 years. St. Clement's has seen a lot of things happen." Alicia hesitated, then pressed on. "And, about the teachers? Do you know Ms. Marissa?" Ms. Odette's smile faltered slightly, and she adjusted her glasses. "I do. Marissa has been here about 15 years. She's a good teacher, but she's always been a bit reserved. Do you know if anything happened before she came here?" Ms. Odette paused, as if weighing her words. Well, I remember there were rumors when she first arrived. Something about an issue at the school where she worked before. But I never knew the details. An issue? Alicia leaned in slightly. People said it involved a student and their parents. Something serious, from what I heard. But Marissa never talked about it, and no one here has dared to ask. Alicia thanked her and left the library with her heart racing. An issue with a student? Could something in Ms. Marissa's past explain her rigid and defensive behavior? As Alicia walked home, she felt she was on the verge of uncovering something significant. But was it a truth she was ready to face? What lay in Ms. Marissa's past that made her so guarded? And how could this revelation change not just Alicia's situation, but the entire school community? Alicia came home with her mind racing, full of unanswered questions. She sat on the living room couch, clutching a pillow as she tried to make sense of everything. Ms. Odette's words lingered in her thoughts, something serious, from what I heard. She knew she couldn't confront Ms. Marissa directly but didn't want to let it go either. After dinner, Alicia picked up her phone and decided to dig deeper. She searched Ms. Marissa's full name, hoping to find something in old articles, news from previous schools, or anything that could provide answers. After some time, she stumbled upon a small article in an online newspaper from a few years back. The story mentioned a school in another city dealing with internal issues following allegations of unfair treatment by a teacher. Names weren't mentioned, but Alicia recognized the description: a literature teacher, highly respected for her expertise, accused of harsh and discriminatory treatment toward an Afro-descendant student. The article stated that the student's parents had taken the matter to the school administration, which handled the issue internally. Shortly afterward, the teacher requested a transfer. Alicia felt a chill run down her spine. Could it be that Ms. Marissa was the teacher in the article? And if so, what did that mean now? The next morning, she found Clara in the courtyard before classes began. "Clara, I think I found something about Ms. Marissa," Alicia said. Clara's eyes widened with curiosity. "What is it?" Alicia explained the article she had found. Clara listened closely, her expression shifting between surprise and concern. "That explains a lot, Alicia," Clara said. "But, what are you going to do with this?" Alicia wasn't sure. Part of her wanted to confront the teacher and demand answers, but another part knew she had to be cautious. She didn't want to make the situation worse. Later, during literature class, Ms. Marissa introduced the class to Quarto de Despejo by Carolina Maria de Jesus. Alicia's chest tightened as she listened to the teacher discuss social inequalities in a detached manner, as though listing facts. When Ms. Marissa asked the class to share their impressions of the book, Alicia seized the opportunity. "Ms. Marissa, may I speak?" she asked, raising her hand. Ms. Marissa nodded, her gaze fixed on Alicia. "I think the book shows how prejudice and inequality can destroy lives, but also how people find strength to resist." Carolina used her voice to fight against the barriers she faced, and I think that's a lesson we can all learn from. The room fell silent. The other students seemed to hold their breath, waiting for the teacher's reaction. Ms. Marissa pressed her lips together, a telltale sign of discomfort. "Interesting, Alicia," she finally said. "But I believe we shouldn't romanticize such struggles. Not everyone can overcome their difficulties." Alicia was surprised by the response but noticed something in Ms. Marissa's eyes. For a fleeting moment, it seemed as though she was speaking from personal experience. What more could be hidden behind Ms. Marissa's words? Was Alicia getting closer to uncovering something that could not only redefine their relationship but also shed light on the teacher's own story? After literature class, Alicia left the room with a heavy heart. Something about Ms. Marissa's words felt personal, as if she was carrying more than mere opinions about the book. Yet, the teacher seemed determined to keep her walls up, and Alicia knew it would take more than a simple conversation to uncover the truth. During lunch, Clara found her in the courtyard, carrying 2 juices she had bought at the cafeteria. "Thought you might need one," Clara said, handing a cup to Alicia. "Thanks." Alicia smiled, accepting the gesture. They sat under a tree in the corner of the courtyard, away from the commotion of other students. "Did you notice how Ms. Marissa reacted today?" Alicia asked, still deep in thought. "I did," Clara replied, equally contemplative. It felt like she was talking about something she experienced, not just the book. "Exactly," Alicia agreed. "But why can't she just say what she feels?" Clara shrugged. "Maybe it's easier for her to pretend she doesn't feel anything. Sometimes, it's harder to admit what hurts us." Clara's words lingered in Alicia's mind for the rest of the day. When the last class ended, she made a decision: she needed to understand more about what had really happened in Ms. Marissa's past. The next morning, she went back to the library. She found Ms. Odette shelving books. "Ms. Odette, can I ask you something else?" Alicia said, approaching. "Of course, dear." "What is it? Do you remember anything more about Ms. Marissa and what happened at her previous school?" Ms. Odette hesitated, clutching a book in her hands. "Well, Alicia, I know Marissa doesn't talk about it, but I remember the student involved was very dedicated, much like you. He had big dreams but faced a lot of resistance. I heard his parents fought hard to make sure he wasn't treated unfairly, but even so, the boy ended up leaving the school." "Leaving?" Alicia asked, shocked. "Yes. It was very sad. I think it left a mark on both him and Marissa." Alicia stood silent, absorbing the information. A knot formed in her throat at the thought of someone so young having their dreams cut short due to injustice. But she also began to understand that Ms. Marissa might be carrying guilt over what had happened, even if she refused to admit it. Later, as Alicia walked home, she thought about how she could use what she had learned to change the situation. Maybe instead of confronting Ms. Marissa outright, she could find a way to open a dialogue that would help them both deal with the weight of the past. However, when she arrived at school the next day, something felt off. There was a strange atmosphere, as if everyone knew something she didn't. Clara found her in the hallway, looking uneasy. "Alicia, did you see the notice?" Clara asked, holding a piece of paper she had taken from the bulletin board. "What notice?" Clara handed her the paper. It was a note stating that Ms. Marissa had been called to a meeting with the school administration that afternoon. What had prompted the meeting with the administration? And how could this conversation potentially alter the course of everything? The day at school felt interminable. Alicia couldn't focus on any of her classes, knowing that Ms. Marissa's meeting with the administration was scheduled for that afternoon. Questions swirled in her mind. Why had the teacher been called? Could it be tied to the comments students had been making? During lunch, Alicia and Clara sat together in the courtyard. "Do you think the meeting is about how she treats the students?" Clara asked, nibbling on a cheese roll. "Maybe," Alicia replied. "But I think it's something deeper, something she doesn't want anyone to know. What if it's about what happened at her old school?" Clara suggested. Alicia remained silent, pondering. It seemed likely that Ms. Marissa's past was catching up to her, but Alicia didn't want it to lead to more conflict. She wanted to find a way to turn the situation into something meaningful for both the teacher and herself. In the final class of the day, the room was unusually quiet. When Ms. Marissa entered, her demeanor was even more serious than usual. She avoided eye contact with the students and spoke in a mechanical tone, as though she were simply going through the motions. After class, Alicia lingered as the other students left. When Ms. Marissa began packing up her materials, Alicia gathered her courage and approached. "Ms. Marissa, can I talk to you?" The teacher looked up, visibly tired. "Make it quick, Alicia. I have an important meeting." Alicia hesitated, then decided to be honest. "I know you're carrying something from your past. Something that seems to be hurting you. And I think, maybe it's affecting how you treat me." For a moment, Ms. Marissa's eyes widened, but she quickly returned to her usual rigid demeanor. "Alicia, I don't know where you got that idea, but it's none of your business." "I'm not trying to accuse you of anything," Alicia said gently. "I just think carrying this alone can't be easy." For a fleeting moment, it seemed as though Ms. Marissa might respond, but the sound of the school bell broke the moment. She hurriedly gathered her papers and left the room, leaving Alicia standing there, unsure of what to feel. Later, as Alicia walked down the hallway, she noticed the door to the principal's office was slightly ajar. Inside, she could hear voices, one of them unmistakably Ms. Marissa's. "I did my best back then," Ms. Marissa said, her voice trembling. "But maybe my best wasn't enough." "Marissa, we all make mistakes," replied a male voice, which Alicia recognized as Mr. Augusto, the principal. "But we need to find ways to make amends, especially when those mistakes still affect us." Alicia stepped away from the door, torn between wanting to hear more and respecting the teacher's privacy. She realized that while she yearned for answers, it was up to Ms. Marissa to decide when, or if, she was ready to share them. What would Ms. Marissa do after the meeting? Would she be willing to confront her past and open the door to a new beginning? The next day, the school felt unusually quiet. Alicia noticed the subtle glances students exchanged whenever Ms. Marissa passed by in the hallways. Something had shifted since the meeting with the administration, but no one seemed to know exactly what. During literature class, Ms. Marissa appeared more introspective than ever. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant, as she discussed the day's topics. When the bell rang for lunch, she didn't leave the room immediately as she usually did. Alicia saw her chance. "Ms. Marissa, can I speak with you again?" she asked as the other students began filing out. Ms. Marissa regarded her for a moment, as if deliberating. Finally, she nodded. "Go ahead." Alicia took a deep breath before speaking. "I know it must be hard to talk about what happened before you came here, but sometimes facing those things can help." Ms. Marissa placed the notebook she was holding down on her desk and sat in her chair. Her gaze grew distant, but there was a palpable sadness in her eyes. "You're very young, Alicia. Maybe you don't understand, but there are things that follow us, even when we try to leave them behind." "I think I understand more than you realize," Alicia replied, feeling her confidence grow. "I know what it's like to be treated differently, as if you're not as valuable as everyone else." For a long moment, Ms. Marissa stayed silent. Then, finally, she spoke. "Many years ago, I had a student. He was brilliant, like you. But I couldn't see beyond my own prejudices. He ended up leaving school because of me." The confession was painful, and Alicia could see that Ms. Marissa was struggling to hold back tears. "I've carried that guilt with me ever since. When I came to this school, I thought it would be a fresh start, but I see now that I still make the same mistakes." "But you can change that," Alicia said, stepping closer. "You can start now, with us." Ms. Marissa looked up at Alicia, surprised by the strength in her voice. "I don't know if I can." "Yes, you can. Everyone makes mistakes, but what matters is what we do afterward." For the first time, Ms. Marissa smiled, a small, genuine smile. "Maybe you're right, Alicia." That day, something shifted. In the following classes, Ms. Marissa began treating Alicia with more care, listening to her ideas without interrupting and even praising some of her responses. The class noticed the difference, and Alicia saw that, little by little, the walls were beginning to come down. Although Ms. Marissa was showing signs of change, was it enough to heal the wounds of the past? And how could Alicia continue to support her on this journey forward? The weeks that followed brought visible changes to the classroom. Ms. Marissa, once rigid and distant, began to show a softer side. While she maintained her serious demeanor, her approach to the students, especially Alicia, became noticeably more considerate. During one literature class, she asked the students to share personal stories of overcoming challenges that related to themes in the books they were studying. Alicia realized this was more than just an exercise, it was a genuine attempt to create a space for dialogue. When it was Alicia's turn, she stood, looked around the room, and took a deep breath. "When I first came here, I felt out of place. I didn't know anyone, and it seemed like there were so many barriers to being accepted. But I've learned that the best way to overcome that is to believe in myself and keep doing my best." She glanced at Ms. Marissa as she finished, and the teacher nodded in acknowledgement, a gesture that carried a sense of mutual understanding. At the end of the class, Ms. Marissa called Alicia aside for a private conversation. "I want to thank you for helping me see what I was doing," the teacher said sincerely. "I know I can't change the past, but I'm trying to do better moving forward." Alicia smiled, feeling the weight of those words. "Everyone deserves a second chance, Ms. Marissa." Not long after, an unexpected announcement came to the class. The school had decided to host a cultural event featuring performances and discussions on social and literary themes. Alicia was chosen to lead one of the discussions, on diversity and inclusion in schools. "Looks like you're our spokesperson now, huh?" Clara teased as they walked down the hallway. "Seems like it," Alicia replied, a mix of nervousness and excitement in her voice. The event was a resounding success. Alicia spoke confidently about how literature can be a powerful tool to break down barriers and foster empathy. At the end of her presentation, Ms. Marissa was among the first to stand and applaud, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed. That evening, as Alicia walked home, she felt a profound sense of peace. She knew that the path to real change was a long one, but she had taken an important step, not just for herself, but for her teacher and the entire school. Ms. Marissa continued teaching with renewed purpose, more aware of the impact her actions could have. Alicia became an inspiration to her peers, showing that courage and faith can transform even the hardest situations. The school community, once indifferent, began to embrace the value of creating an inclusive and welcoming environment. And you? Have you ever faced a situation where you had to confront something difficult to spark change? Share your story in the comments. Your experience could inspire others. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more transformative stories. This is the Narratives That Embrace channel. Stay blessed, and see you in the next story.